Hi again, everyone. Welcome back to Little K Artistry. I am Kristen, the artist also known as Little K. And in this video, I'm just going to be showing you a real simple and fun way to make some beautiful art for your home, or for a gift, or if you're so inclined to bring to an art fair and sell, just to enjoy for yourself. This is just a simple, really, I think it's really elegant and a very easy way to make some decorative mixed media, mostly texture art. It's going to be a really fun project, and I hope that you enjoy this. So this is just a 14-inch. This is a cradled wood canvas, and as you can see, I've just put a layer of primer down, a layer of gesso on it. And today I'm going to be working with some different textures. And the first layer that I'm going to be putting down on this piece is just a real basic first layer of texture, and I'm going to be using gesso to create that texture look. And this is a simple way to just make some light texture on your canvas. You can do this on either a cradled wood canvas like this one, or on a traditional cotton canvas. Just add a pretty generous layer of gesso. There are a number of different brands out there that you can use. Just choose the gesso that you like the best. And you'll see in a lot of my texture videos, this is the medium that I use a lot for this style, to both make a base layer of texture. Also, when I'm doing my Urban Decay series, this is what I use to adhere some of the other textures to the actual canvas. I'll use a layer of gesso, sort of as a glue. So I'm just going to put this layer down and just lightly go over it like that. That just kind of gets it pretty much a generous layer throughout the whole canvas. And then the next thing that you can do, so there's two ways that you can do this. You can either use a catalyst wedge like this, or you can use a palette knife like this. And with the palette knife technique, this would give you a really tight, small texture all over your canvas like that. And then you can kind of smooth it out a little bit if you want, in areas where you want there to be, where you want the texture to be a little more flat. You can smooth it out like that. So this creates a really interesting texture. Do this over the whole canvas and then just smooth areas out. This is one of my favorite ways of it just creates a really light texture base. It's not a deep texture, and we are going to be putting more texture on top of this. So a light texture is really nice. Another way, I'll show you another way to create texture, is with a catalyst wedge. And this is like a freestyle kind of thing. You use the edge of your catalyst wedge and you just pull in different directions. So I can smooth out some of the layers that I did with the palette knife. You still have some texture, but it's a softer texture. and then you can play around with it. I would encourage you, if you're trying texture art, to play around with it. Try different methods of creating texture. You can roll up a wad of cloth and create texture that way. Some people use tin foil. You can wad up some tin foil. And then there are textures that you can actually apply to the canvas and leave on. So I like to do a combination of these two. So we start out with the small texture, kind of almost looks like stucco. You start out using the palette knife, and then you go through and then just smooth out some of it with the catalyst wedge. Not all of it, because you still want there to be some texture on the canvas. And then sometimes doing that, maybe we'll make bubbles. So just use your heat gun just to go by, just to pop the bubbles so you don't have any bubbles, because you will, anytime you're applying a force, you're going to introduce air into that layer. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but when you start doing something like, I'll just show you, see if I can create some bubbles here. Of course, now the bubbles aren't being created, but when you create the bubbles, there's some there. You can just, and they disappear really easily. I actually did want a little bit more texture in the center there. There we go. It just makes it look really interesting. It's a very random, abstract, and that's what we're doing. We're creating abstract art. Okay, so this, I'm liking this as the base layer of texture. Again, this is just gesso on a cradled wood canvas, and I'm gonna let this dry, and then I will come back and apply some, I'm kind of debating whether or not I want to add another layer of texture before I add some color. I'm going to think about that for a minute, and then when we come back, for me it will be several hours, for you it will be just a few seconds because I'm going to edit this video. There, okay, so I really like this. So I'm going to let this dry, and the thing that I like about gesso is that it doesn't crack when it dries. So I'm going to leave this just like this, going to let it dry, and then we'll come back, we'll add some more texture, we'll do some mandalas, and then we'll do some color. So be right back. There is that texture from a different angle, a little bit closer up. Wanted you to be able to see that that does actually produce a really nice light texture on the canvas, and you can see where I smoothed it out with the catalyst wedge. I'm going to go ahead and let that dry, and then we'll come back and we'll see what other really awesome stuff I can add to this canvas. All dry. That only took a second or two for you guys. It's been a little while for me. I am going to move on to the next phase, and this is adding some texture with a mandala stencil. This is the one that I've selected. You just get those right on Amazon. And this is one of many mixes that I use. This one happens to be a mixture of joint compound water and a glue. And whatever you decide to do, make sure that you mix it really, really well. So this I use just a whisk. Consistency and ratios, really, it just depends on what your outcome is to be, what you want the final outcome to be. I wanted mine to be smooth, but yet hold the shape of the design. So that is the thickness that I'm going to use. I'm going to apply this with a palette knife, and I have a plan in mind for one corner of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place the mandala design off center like that, because I have a plan for this side. So then all I'm going to do is, actually I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of brown to this. This is just a little Van Dyke brown. And the reason I'm doing this is just to give it a little bit of a color so that you all can see how this is going down. Plus, I am going to be introducing some browns into this piece as well, so that this will be fine. So I'm just going to mix this up again. You can see it's a color instead of just being the white, because the white on white is really hard to see in the videos. So I thought maybe that would help if I add a little bit of a color to my texture paste here. There we go. Now maybe that will make it a little bit easier for you guys all to see as I put this down. I'm just gonna kind of drizzle a little bit around before I smooth it out. There we go. Okay, then I hold the design and I'm just gonna scrape along to smooth that compound into the holes. And then I will scrape off the excess. This is a really fun and easy way to create a beautiful piece of art for your home. Or like I said, if you want to give it as a gift. It's not real difficult. It does take a little bit of practice, but really not much. Mostly it's just the consistency of the paste that you're using, the texture paste. Just making sure you get the consistency right. Not that difficult at all. Now I do want some interest, a little bit of texture to this design. Typically, I would scrape this off so that it's all even, but I am going to make a little bit of a texture on the mandala design itself with my palette knife here. Not too much, but just a little to make it a little bit more interesting. There. Okay, now fingers crossed. Moment of truth when I lift this up. There we go. There's my design. Very pretty. Love that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this dry. You can see where there's some texture in the mandala. It's not completely smooth, and I like it that way. I feel like it's a little more rustic that way. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry. Wipe a little bit of this little extra off there. I'm going to let this dry, and I love how this, actually really like the color too. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back, and I've got an idea for something to do along the outside as well. And then what I will likely do is come back and not seal it, but smooth it out and get it all to be one layer of protectant. Sort of what I'll do is I'll put another layer of gesso on the whole thing once I get the rest of the texture on, and then we'll start adding some color. And I do want to do browns and golds and things for this one too. So there you go. That's the second step. And I will be back as soon as this dries to do the next step. See you in a second. I've set the piece aside, and while I'm waiting for that to dry, I am going to be looking at some textures. So there's a bunch of different things that you can use. Really, anything that you can adhere to a canvas, you can probably use as texture. I've just got 3 here that I really love, that I'm going to be experimenting with. They're really easy to find. This is burlap. You can find this at pretty much anywhere, any craft store. I just got mine at Walmart. This is cheesecloth, again, also got at Walmart. And then this is just some cotton 3-ply rope And I think I got this right at Michael's or any craft store you can get this. And I like that it's nice and thick if you want to use it this way. Also, it's 3 plies, so if you want to separate it, you can use the 3 separate strands. And I think I'm probably going to be doing a combination of these 3. I'm not sure yet. I'll let you know once we get going. One thing I like about these is, first of all, the cheesecloth. Let me see, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see this or not, so I'm going to put it on a dark background. This cheesecloth is really fine, it's really soft, it's easy to use, it's super pliable. The other thing that I really like about it is you can use multiple layers. If you want a real thin, just a gentle sheet, almost non-existent texture, you can use the 1 layer. And then the other thing I like about it is that you can stretch it and pull it in different directions and you get a thicker texture, or you can do it 2 ply and you get even more of a texture. You could do it 3 ply, you could use it fully in the 4 ply, the way it comes off, and just ball it up and then make like a funky design like that. You could use it straight and do it almost has like a cloth, like a crisscross texture like that. You can stretch it and make the texture diagonal. I'm just so eager to try and see what I can do to make this look really cool. It's so malleable. And then this is the burlap. This is really neat because you can use it as is and just have a really cool crisscross cloth type pattern. Or if you want, which is what I think I'm going to be doing, if you cut the edges off, the stitched, I'm not sure if it's stitched or if it's glued or how they get it to stay, but they connect, they seal the edges so that it doesn't unravel. And if you cut that off, then you can work with the individual strands of burlap. This is also really neat that you can use for a texture. But this way, let me get one of my dotting tools. This way you can, let's see, I'm going to go with just a small, let me just show you on a small piece. You can just take the individual strands out, and then you can use the individual strands as texture like that, so it's almost like straw. Or if you pull some of the strands off the burlap cloth like this, so you could use those as is. But if you pull some of these out, now you can kind of play around with, see how you can, and then you can, one of the things that I really like doing is creating like bumps. So you can do an actual, like a raised bump, and then it still retains the design of the burlap. So it kind of, it's almost 3D. I'm not sure if I'm communicating this correct. I'm just so excited by all these various textures and ways that you can use them to influence the feel of your art. So just grab a piece of burlap and play around with it. This is how I learned how to do this. I saw an artist in a video putting burlap, just as burlap, stretched it out a little bit and just placed it flat on the canvas, and I thought, oh, that's a really cool texture. But then I thought, what if, we soak it to moisten it with, and I'll show you what I'm going to be doing in just a minute. When I go to the next step, soak it, moisten it a little bit, stretch it out, and then put it on the canvas, like that. So now, so you can see from the side, now you've got a whole really cool looking design. And then if you wanted to, you could obviously add some more pieces afterwards. my thinking is what I'd like to do is I want to do some light texture. And I don't know if I'm going to do this on this piece that I'm working on now or not. We'll see. Do some light, like a stretching of the cheesecloth, just to kind of get a base texture down there. And then put something like that on top of it. So you've got the texture that I did with the gesso on the canvas, and then you've got this light mesh texture underneath, and then on top, just, I mean, they're really cool. There's so many. What I'm just trying to get you guys to do is to see, just be creative and kind of let your creative juices flow, so to speak, and don't rein yourself in. Like, because this is what I'm learning in my art journey. I take and I look at a piece of burlap and I go, okay, well, I could maybe scrunch it. That doesn't really work. I guess if I wet it, then I could scrunch it, and that would make a really neat texture like that, right? Especially if this is wet, if it has glue and water on it. And then you can put that on your canvas, or take it and just kind of, once it's wet, it will stick to the canvas, and then you can twist it, and then it almost looks like a flower. Once you get it twisted, because that was horrible because it's dry, but you know what I'm saying, it'll look like a flower once it's twisted. You could do that. And then I was like, well, what happens if I just kind of deconstruct and pull it apart? What kind of funky, neat designs? And that's when I discovered, well, you can make like a 3D, almost looks like a computer, like when they do the CGI in movies and they put the mesh on the person's face, so that then they can make the animated person, on top of the computer. So that's kind of what it looks like to me. So I'm just going to encourage you guys to just play around with textures. And I didn't realize any of this stuff until I just started playing with it. And then the cheesecloth, that you can get it so that it frays. So now it kind of looks like a frayed carpet. So if you had that mandala design, you wanted that to look like a rug, and you could put this like along the edge so it'll look like an actual rug, but it's hanging on the wall. Just, ideas. I'm just kind of spitballing here. I don't even really know what I'm saying anymore. I'm just so excited about this creative process. So grab a piece of something and just play around with it. Be like, I wonder what will happen if I put this on my canvas. Anyway, so I don't know, because I obviously haven't created the piece yet, so I'm not sure if I'm going to use one of these or all of them, but we will cross that bridge when we get to it. I just wanted to show you some different ideas for texture, and now we're going to move on and see what happens with that 14-inch piece on the cradled wood canvas that I put the mandala design on it. Let's go! Design is all dry, and I am loving how it turned out. It's perfect, just perfect. What I'm going to do next is add another layer of texture, and I want to do something in this area here. Just a little, I don't think I'm going to go all the way to both these edges, but definitely in this area here. So I'm going to set this aside a little bit. Grab my mixing bowl, and I think what I'm going to do is the first layer, I don't know if I'm going to use the burlap or not, but I definitely want to use some of this cheesecloth. So I am going to just cut a section of it off here. And then what I'm going to do is a mixture of a little bit of wood glue, and this is just some wood glue that I found at the store. And then a little bit of water. Because what I want it to do is adhere to the canvas, but I also want it to be pliable enough so that I can move it around. Okay, so I just a little wood glue and some water. And then to that, I'm going to add my piece of cheesecloth. And I want to get this all moistened enough so that I can make it pliable on the canvas, but I also want it to adhere. So I'm just gonna kind of sop up that wood glue mixture. like that. Add a tiny bit more water to it. Get my cloth to wipe my hands off. All right. Now the fun part. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off the spinner actually to do this part. I'll set my spinner aside. And now I've got this soaked piece of cheesecloth, and I am going to stretch it out as much as I can before I actually get it onto the canvas. And then once I get it on the canvas, I'm going to scrunch it up a little bit. So this is kind of messy, so make sure that you wear gloves, clothing that you don't care much about. All right. I'm just going to kind of drape it along here a little bit. And I don't want it to be right up against the piece. I don't want it to be right up against the mandala. Just a little like that, I think. I don't want to lose the texture that I did first with the gesso. Okay. And then you can kind of just play around with it, move it around a little. Now for this piece, I think I'm kind of playing with the idea of having the composition go off the canvas a little bit, because I think it might be interesting to have it that way. Again, just trying to kind of think out of the box here. I like the idea of having it go off the canvas just to kind of make it look a little more interesting and not define it to the actual square part of the canvas. So I really like this. And what I think I'll do, I'm going to sop up a little bit of that wood glue that's on the edges. I really like this. The idea of it being a little bit thinner too as it gets closer to the mandala design. I don't want that real harsh edge. Try to thin it out a little bit. Kind of like that. There. I like the hole here where there's no there. Okay, I love the composition here. Like that. I really like the idea of it coming off the canvas. So what I'm going to do, for drying purposes, because I don't want it to stick to this paper that I have underneath of it, for drying purposes, I think what I'm going to do is just kind of lift it up, and I'm going to put a little bit of the, oh, what's the word I'm trying to think of? The, not wax paper, parchment paper. There we go. Oh, I might use wax paper. And I'm going to put a little bit of that under here just so that it doesn't stick to this, because this is like a cotton, the puppy pad that I use to protect my table. I don't want it to stick to that and end up being glued to that. So what I'm going to do is, for drying purposes, I am just going to have it just be a little bit of that underneath so that it dries. I'm not sure I like the way this is looking here. So that it dries because it won't stick to the parchment paper. There we go. I like that. Just trying to get it to be a little bit 3D. There we go. Okay. So I'll put a little bit of parchment paper under this, let it dry, and then we'll come back and I'm going to put gesso over the whole thing. And then I'm going to do some painting. I think I really like this. I'm considering whether or not I want to put a little something here. But I really like the simplicity of this and I don't want to foul it up. So I will be back once this is dry and then we'll decide what we want to do from there. So I'll be back in just a minute. All right, the texture is fully dry now, and I love how it is hanging over the edge of the canvas, and it's just, the composition I think is just lovely. And I think probably once it's hanging and complete, that will be the composition. So I really love that. It looks like fishnet here at the top. So the next step is to put a layer of gesso on everything so that it's all ready for the paint, the colors. And what I'm going to do is just put a little bit, using that same little bit of parchment paper underneath this, just so that, because it is off the canvas, the texture is hanging off the canvas, and I don't want the, once I put the gesso on the texture, I don't want it to stick to my spinner. So I'll just put a little bit of that. There we go. Scoot that under there a little bit. There. That way I can put the gesso on and it won't stick to my spinner. I'll just let it dry just as is. So again, this is acrylic gesso. Just choose the one that you like. And what I'm going to do is just gently cover this all. And this is a little bit of a time-consuming process, so I will just speed this part up a little bit for you. This looks really good. What you saw me do there at the end with the sponge, I noticed that when I had brushed on the gesso, that it was a little bit too thick in some areas, and I didn't want to lose the delicate detail in that cheesecloth because it's got a really beautiful texture detail to it. And I noticed that when the gesso was a little bit too thick in spots, you couldn't see that beautiful texture as well. So I wanted to blot a little bit, just removed a little bit of that. And then I added with the texture, with the gesso, I added a little bit more of texture onto the mandala area because I want it to be a little bit rough. There's a little hair in there. There we go. I'm shedding my art, a little bit of my DNA in there. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry, and then I will come back when it is all completely dry, and then we will start adding a little bit more color. See you in a bit. Really don't. No. Friendly. Let me know.
Mm-hmm.